to be. Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone. Let me welcome you for being present for today's session on integrating SEL with career and workforce development. We're going to get started right away. We've lost a few minutes, but that's okay. We understand that technology is always fun and fabulous, especially in this day and age. If you're not super familiar with Zoom, there is a chat feature. If you look at the bottom toolbar, if you will, of your screen, and you can use that chat feature to either raise your hand if you have a specific question or drop a question or comment in the chat. We're going to be monitoring the chat feature so we can see any of the questions and hopefully pause the presentation at key times to be able to be responsive. That's also where we're going to be dropping a deluge of resources. So get your bookmark ready to go because you're going to get a lot of real treasures in today's session. We do encourage you to respond to any of this vis-a-vis the chat, and we'll take a question and answer period during our session today. To make up a little bit of time, with regret, we are missing one of our key presenters who was going to open up our room, and that's Chi Kim. It's important to acknowledge Chi, who is currently the CEO at Pure Edge, which is a private operating foundation. But before that, she was a school superintendent and a school principal and a teacher and leadership coach. And she serves on the board of the Great Minds Nonprofit Board. She's also a member of CASEL's board of directors, where I am from, and my colleagues who are from CASEL are here with you today as well. I'll introduce them in just a moment. But she's also on the board for the Coalition for Career Development Center. So it's really natural that she would have opened this session, but because of time and technology, we regret she had to go ahead and move on. So please consider this your warm welcome in that we hope you see yourself and your needs and your intentions in this broad outline that we offer as an agenda. And depending on your interests and your questions, we're going to be very, very flexible. We're happy to adjust, and we're definitely inviting your participation to ensure that we accomplish what you are setting out to gain out of today's session. So before we get rolling, I just want to invite you to share in the chat something that you're hoping to learn or accomplish in this session, or a question or a curiosity you might have. I'd really love to hear from everybody. Just one, so I know you know how to use the chat feature. Again, at the bottom toolbar, I see lots of people coming through on chat. Thank you for that. If you can just pause, take a look at this agenda, and maybe pull out a keyword or connect to something that you're hoping, your intentions for today's session will be in much better shape to align to your needs and priorities for our learning journey today. So let's just give that a couple of seconds. And while we're waiting on folks to respond there, I'm going to drop our first link, which is that of CASEL. Yes, that is the correct chat box to drop any comments in the chat feature. The chats are specific to the breakout room itself. So thank you for asking that. That was really helpful. And hoping more folks are coming through with some of their intentions for today. While you're doing that, I do want to take a moment to introduce one of my mentors. I've had two really impactful career mentors in my lifetime. One of those two is Dr. Linda Dusenbury, who has been a senior consulting scientist with CASEL for many, many years, the impetus behind our Collaborating Stage initiative. And she really is a national treasure and a nationally recognized expert on social emotional learning, planning, supporting, policy coaching, evaluating evidence-based strategies, ensuring that we're making the world a better place for children and adolescents. from all different types of backgrounds, communities, and experiences. She has launched the Collaborating States Initiative in 2016, which is CASEL's national community of practice with over 43 states that participate in a variety of ways to advance social emotional learning policy and ensure that there are high quality evidence-based resources that are making their way to the field and to share those resources through state agencies to local education agencies, school districts, schools, and classrooms. So we really appreciate Linda's influence and strength in that space. And I think for sure, James, you're going to hear a lot on getting organized around SEL for career exploration, and love the emphasis on secondary ed, because sometimes in the SEL space, we don't hear a lot about secondary ed. So I would offer that career and workforce development is a great place to start in secondary, but we also offer a developmental framework that takes us from the early years all the way to graduation. So spoiler alert on that. And love this notion of connection making between career exploration and SEL, 100%. Thank you for that, Shannon. And Lori, career exploration courses specifically, we've seen some really good examples, particularly as integrated standards and competencies are coming through some of the states that we're going to spotlight that serve as the springboard for some of that real intentional interdisciplinary approach. So I think we're going to meet those needs. And again, I encourage you to use the chat feature as more needs emerge. So with that, I'm going to introduce one more time our friend, colleague, and mentor, Dr. Linda Dusenbury. Linda, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dana. And it's so great to be with all of you and really excited about the conversation, given the kinds of questions and curiosities coming up in the chat. I think this is going to be really fun. So I'm excited to tell you all the story of how CASEL's been approaching the important work of integrating SEL with career and workforce development. If I could have the next slide, Caitlin. I want to start off by saying how grateful we are to CCD for the opportunity to have this conversation with you all today. I'm going to tell you how CASEL came to this work and share what we're learning. And it started with the CASEL Collaborating States Initiative, or CSI as we call it, which is funded by PureEdge. And that's another reason we would have loved to have had Chi in the room with us, because we're so grateful to PureEdge for all of their support in this important integration of SEL with career and workforce development. The CSI is a community of practice of state teams that launched in 2016, and CASEL's purpose was to support any and all states that wanted to advance SEL. So it was a very broad purpose. We started with 18 states in 2016, and today the CSI is connected to more than 40 states. Recognizing that each state is at a different point of readiness and has different priorities, each state in the CSI is asked to develop their own customized plan for advancing SEL along the lines of their state's priorities and situations. And just over 2 years ago, with support from PureEdge, the CSI launched a focused initiative to support those states that wanted to explicitly integrate SEL into their workforce initiatives. And equity was a driving principle and consideration in all this work. If I could have the next slide, please. So 2 years ago, the focused initiative to integrate SEL with career and workforce development started with a focused group of 8 states in a community of practice. And that community of practice has now grown to 10 states displayed on this slide. More are continuing to join. And if there are any states represented today that would be interested in learning about that, we would love to know. So please plan to reach out. Our contact information is going to be displayed at the end. Everyone agrees how important this work is in terms of preparing young people for the future economy, for future readiness. But the truth is there hasn't been a lot of research yet on this area specifically, and states are innovating. They're developing and evaluating innovative practices and initiatives. CASEL's their partner in this work to learn as they learn. But one of our goals is always then to share with all 50 states. So if I could have the next slide, please. So some of you may be familiar with the CASEL framework, or CASEL wheel, as it's sometimes called, and we could easily spend an hour just talking on the different components of this. I'm going to need to touch on it pretty quickly here. If you have questions, we're happy to come back to it and discuss it more deeply if that's helpful. But for our purposes today, I want to talk especially about the core components you see at the center of the framework: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. The real-world skills and competencies every student and adult needs for success. And these all connect to today's conversation for SEL and career and workforce development. I'm going to come back to talking about these core competencies in just a second, but I want to start by saying a word about the outer rings around these core competencies, because here's the point. Social and emotional skills are developing all the time, from cradle to grave. Certainly, SEL is happening all the time in classrooms and schools, and we all know that families and caregivers are more important than anyone in laying the foundation and supporting social and emotional development in children. But when we talk about educational approaches to SEL, we're talking about strategies we can use to intentionally support the development of these skills to optimize their development. How can we intentionally teach SEL? How can we create conditions in these rings? How can we teach it in classrooms and schools? How can we support parents? What can we do to create opportunities and conditions in the community that are intentionally, strategically designed to help students develop these critical skills? Some of you may know that the CASEL framework was updated in the past couple of years, and this is our updated framework that's designed to be much more explicit about equity as well. We know from research that for educational approaches to SEL to be effective, they have to be culturally responsive and engaging to all students so that students feel they belong. Effective SEL approaches address this through classroom and school-wide culture, as well as authentic partnerships with families and caregivers. Effective approaches also provide aligned learning opportunities more broadly in communities. I want to talk about the 5 core competencies now that are at the center of the ring. To do that, could I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to share a crosswalk that we developed at the beginning of our work with states to integrate SEL with career and workforce development. When we first started our work with states, they wanted to intentionally integrate SEL and career work and workforce development. And one of the first things we did to try to support them was to look at the skills employers or business leaders were talking about in the literature and in surveys, and how those aligned with the core social emotional learning competencies. And we found they aligned a lot. And so this crosswalk can be a good way of already connecting SEL and career and workforce development. Here's what I mean. If you look at the left-hand column, self-awareness is the first core competency and simply refers to real-world skills like the ability to recognize our own feelings, our own strengths, and our own interests. For career development, self-awareness obviously shows up all over the place. We expect kids to think about what excites them. What do they feel passionate about? Kids need to know these things about themselves if they're going to pick good career paths. And employers, when they talk about self-awareness, they often talk about the need for employees who have openness and have a sense of self-worth. These are all aspects of self-awareness. Self-management refers to our ability to manage our feelings or self-regulate. and to set and achieve goals. Those are sub-competencies of self-management. A couple of quick examples for purposes of workforce development. If we're anxious in job interviews, we need to know how to manage that anxiety if we want to be successful in those interviews. And for career and workforce development, it's essential that we have goals. In terms of self-management, we often find in the literature and in surveys, employers talking about the need for employees who show initiative or who are able to work independently. That's also self-management. And so all of these things become important in career and workforce development. Social awareness refers to skills like empathy and perspective taking, as well as understanding the social world around us. For purposes of career and workforce development, it includes awareness about what kinds of jobs are available and who might be able to help me learn more about those jobs. Who would be a good mentor to me in this process? If I'm in an internship or a job, the ability to take the perspective of supervisors or colleagues is critically important. What are they expecting me to do? What's my supervisor's goal for this task that I'm doing? That's all based on social awareness. And when you look at the literature and surveys, employers often talk about this in terms of the need for employees who have sensitivity to others, including those with different backgrounds, for example. And this becomes especially important in customer service. What's relationship skills? Okay. For career and workforce readiness, am I able to communicate effectively on the job? Do I know how to get along with others? Do I know how to build relationships with mentors and supervisors? Do I know how to work through conflicts or problems at work? Employers often also talk about the need for listening skills and important communication skills, or teamwork skills, important social skills. All of these are relationship skills. In terms of decision-making, responsible decision-making, it's huge for workforce development. Do I make good decisions or choices about my career and what I want to do? Do I make good decisions about how to manage my time and execute the work? Do I make good decisions about when to ask for help? Employers often talk about this in terms of the need for integrity and being able, and employees having the ability to be able to analyze complex problems. All responsible decision-making skills. Business leaders and employers agree. These skills are the most important, these real-world skills are the most important skills they seek in job applicants. And it's no wonder. They're so important for succeeding in the future economy. Could I have the next slide, Caitlin, please? Okay, I'm going to tell you more about our framework for this work, our framework for this work. But right before I do that, I also want to mention that we define college and career ready, or college and career development rather, very broadly to capture everything we can about career and workforce initiatives related to future readiness. So we're including CTE, career pathways, dual degrees, apprenticeships, internships, support for entrepreneurial skills, project-based learning, community service, service-based learning. You're going to see our framework in just a second. And we use a very broad definition of the kinds of activities that we think are important. And very importantly, leveraging personalized career and academic planning aligns and coordinates multiple workforce development initiatives and is a tremendous opportunity for the integration of SEL and career and workforce development in terms of individualizing or personalizing all of the things kids are doing in a coherent way. So we use a very broad and inclusive term. And could I have the next slide, please? So this is our framework that we developed in collaboration with the 8 states based on our work in this SEL and workforce community of practice. It was designed to help states organize for the work to systemically integrate evidence-based social and emotional learning with career and workforce development while promoting equity. You see the SEL framework, or the CASEL wheel with the 5 core competencies, is critical in all of it. It's right there in the middle. But I want to focus in on the two big arrows to the right of the framework for a second, the blue arrow and the green arrow. What we're saying in these two arrows are really our big recommendations for states that want to do this work. First, for the blue arrow, we're saying each and every kid needs high quality education in SEL from preschool through high school. This is what CASEL has always focused on, and the states we're partnering with in the community of practice agree with this. Building foundational SEL or real world skills should be happening for all kids throughout their K-12 education. And there are lots of evidence-based approaches and programs to help with that. The green arrow is what's really new for this initiative and key to the integration that we're all interested in. What we're saying here, along with states that are doing this work, is that we should also intentionally and deliberately integrate SEL with all career and workforce activities, including, importantly, personal, career, and academic planning, as I said, which is such an opportunity to personalize SEL development and to make that coherent connection between SEL and career and workforce development. And we had some questions or some topics at the beginning around the developmental piece for all of this. For all of these resources that we're sharing, you can see in the deck, we're sharing all these links when we say much more about this, but in the light green cells under the green arrow, you see that when we say that SEL should be explicitly integrated with career and workforce development activities, we mean that developmentally and in developmentally appropriate ways from preschool to high school. Given time constraints, I know there are probably more questions about that. That's all I'm going to say for the moment, but happy to come back to that later in the next half hour of our session. Could I have the next slide, please? So we're now at the process working with the 10 states in the SEL and career and workforce development, where we've learned so much from these states, and we're hearing from other states their interest in knowing more about this work. And so our purpose at this point is really to begin to share what we've learned with all 50 states. So that's the moment we're in right now. Could I have the next slide, please? So this, who's our timekeeper? So we're doing pretty well, actually, because we're now
we're right at time at 4 minutes to kind of pivot over, but I think maybe we can open the floor for any questions or comments, Linda. I see that Lori really appreciated the framework itself because those linkages between SEL and career workforce development and career exploration is a really specific focus area of that developmental framework. I'm glad we're able to drop the link, and that was helpful for folks. Excuse me, Lori, she's dancing. Lori, do you have a follow-up question or curiosity there that we can maybe build upon?
No, I appreciate the resources so much. I'll take a deeper dive, and but it's so important to integrate this. It's like the ice cube model versus food coloring in the water, right? They can't be standalone little things floating around. They have to infuse in everything. So I love the K to 12, but also tucking in a more focused approach when it comes to career conversations, because a lot of people don't associate it with that upper level, upper need.
Yeah, thank you for that. Totally agree. And want to appreciate, James, your curiosity around career exploration in the secondary space. I think when we're sharing some resources from states, you'll see some of that explicit connection through individualized learning plans. Some call them student success plans, depending on what state you're in. They might be ICAPs, MyCaps, SSPs, ILPs, IPSs. So pick an acronym, they all point to the same thing, which is high quality SEL informed advising amounts to strengthened individualized planning that puts the learner and their family in control, right? And builds up this sense of agency. And I'm hopeful that it demonstrates that it builds up a sense of belonging, deeper connections with the community and with their intentions for their life path. As Dr. Dusenbury mentioned, social and emotional learning skills are really skills for fulfillment in life, and we're developing them at all times to include workforce preparation and our work life.
And I'm appreciating James's question, is there a curriculum being created that can be shared? I think different states and districts are working on different things. I am a researcher who spends a lot of time looking at nationally available evidence-based approaches. And I will say that we have tons of examples that we can talk about, including from the CASEL guide for strong SEL programs. There are not as many examples yet for programs that integrate SEL with career and workforce development. There are some groups working on this, and Dana and Caitlin know I actually want us to go back and really think deeply about the programs that exist, learn more about those, so that we can answer this question. And so I don't know that I have a great answer for you today, James, but I want to have that answer myself and would be happy to share it with you. So definitely let's stay in touch about that. Because that I know is a question that has to get answered well for people to really be able to dig in on a broad scale.
And we're going to share our contact information toward the end, and just want to bring voice to Shannon's comment of appreciation in the crosswalking piece. Shannon, hold on to your seats, because we're going to show you some real deep and I think high quality examples of what that crosswalking piece can look like. And to Linda's point, you know, that can potentially serve as a strong policy connection that germinates, instigates some interdisciplinary connections while we're developing in the space of an evidence-based curriculum one day that demonstrates those integrated paths. So in the meantime, I'm going to keep moving through our deck. Thank you so much for that great comment.
So I'm going to start, if it's okay, sharing some of our resources. Is that okay, Dana?
Yep, and you're getting a comment if there's a difference between the two concepts of social emotional learning and social and emotional learning. So Zinua, apologize for mispronunciation there. Deeply apologize for that, but I think that there might be a nuance that Linda can quickly address.
When I see people talk about it in different ways: social and emotional learning, social emotional learning, social hyphen emotional learning. We're really talking about these real world skills that are and some, it's possible some others might have a slightly different answer, but I use them all interchangeably. So if we're really talking about this collection of real world skills organized around the 5 core competencies of self-awareness, self-management, etc. Okay.
Great. Let's continue with the resource sharing.
So a big report we just released last week provides a policy roadmap for educating future-ready students. This groundbreaking report was developed by Civic in collaboration with CASEL and the Coalition for Career Development Center. And the report focuses on 5 policy domains. So I'm going to spend a little time on this one to introduce you to it. Could I have the next slide, please? So the first policy domain the report talks about is the importance of developing a shared vision of student success that explicitly integrates SEL and workforce development. This is a big, demanding step, and this is something that the state teams involved in our original community of practice ended up spending a lot of time on often. getting everyone on the same page across a state or district to develop a shared vision of student success that it explicitly integrates SEL and career and workforce development isn't automatic. It takes time to break down silos, and it's a big part of the lift, but we have seen it as foundational to a lot of progress in this area. So that's the first policy domain that we talk about in the report. Next slide, please. The second policy domain that comes through loud and clear in this work with states and in the report is the importance of building adult capacity to provide productive and collaborative instructional strategies. So this is a big piece of what gets discussed as well. Could I have the next slide, please? The third piece or policy domain is fostering the creation of safe, supportive, inclusive learning environments that are essential for high quality SEL and equity. Next slide. And fourth, to cultivate opportunities for customized learning, including personalized career and academic planning and individualization, so that students feel engaged by topics that are relevant to them. Next slide, please. The fifth policy domain is about providing flexible, future-ready pathways that lead to stackable credentials that are valued by institutions of higher learning, higher education, and employers, so that it recognizes that youth development is nonlinear. And finally, could I have the next slide, please? I want to make one last point about this big roadmap report, is that the future is uncertain and unchanged and fast changing, as we all know. And it's a big question how education can effectively prepare children for the future when we don't even know exactly what the future will look like, when we don't know what future jobs will be. There's no one path, and to get to where we want to be, where all students are really equipped for the future they'll inherit, education needs to prepare them to be lifelong learners who can navigate whatever career path they may choose, including when those careers may change. They'll need to know how to adapt and have the skills needed to retool when jobs evolve and change throughout their lives, which again underscores the importance of foundational SEL skills. So that's what I wanted to share about the report itself. We invite you to take a look and explore it, but I want to move now to the case studies, unless you think we should pause. Dana, should we just keep going?
I think we should keep going just because we've got about a half hour left, and we've got those great examples and videos to share.
All right, so every state is different, as I said at the beginning, and has to develop its own customized plan for this work. And in our collaboration with CCD, one of the things we were especially interested in doing was lifting up strong examples from states themselves to inspire and inform other states. So we collaborated with CCD to develop 3 detailed case studies. Scott Solberg and his team at CCD took the lead on these, and they were published last week. The links, as you can see, are in the deck. The Delaware is the first of these, and the Delaware case study talks especially about the strong partnerships Delaware cultivated to develop its shared vision for student success. There's so much we learned from Delaware, and to begin to share some of that, I want to turn to my colleague, Dr. Godick, to invite Delaware's voice into the room.
Thank you so much for that. So it was a joy to work with Delaware. They often say, you know, we're the small state, so we can do things pretty efficiently. They have done a not so small thing in creating a very strong shared vision. And if you think about a seed, which is also a small element, Delaware really incubated around that seed working with a broad cross-section of constituents and building up support for SEL and connecting it to work-based learning at the grassroots level, all the way up to the policy level. In a moment, we're going to share a quick video clip where you'll hear Dr. Terry Lawler, who is the SEL policy lead in the state, talk about this. But I'm using that metaphor of the seed intentionally with Delaware, because where Delaware starts what might seem small, in the next case study and video that follows, you'll see more branches around a specific concrete example of a policy action. And then in the last one, you'll see a full tree, which is a whole vast complement of resources. So just wanted to give you a little preview of coming attractions as we start with Delaware, as I said, who started with the seed of building that shared vision. And their shared vision is literally empowering every student to achieve purpose, place, and plans for the future. And I love how that evokes a sense of, definitely career and workforce intentionality, social emotional learning, but a strong sense of belonging, which is an important part of Dr. Lawler's work. So let's hear from Delaware in her own words.
Where we started was really from a foundation of a mutual desire to see young people have opportunities that allowed them to pursue passionately their interests, and then also to live with purpose. The intent of all of our work in developing opportunities for college and career readiness is the understanding that, SEL is a foundation for life. And we want young people to be able to understand and explore their own emotions, but also live cohesively in communities where we're able to do perspective taking and demonstrate social awareness to build stronger, more resilient landscapes for everyone. And so to do that, we have to work collaboratively. And that foundation and that desire to cultivate sort of a culture of care for everyone becomes a springboard for every policy decision.
Yeah, I love that. So you can hear in her comments that reinforcement around the springboard for every policy decision. And again, in this case, it's empowering every student to achieve purpose, place, and plans for the future. And I'm going to share with you one artifact that we've been promising, which is Delaware's social emotional learning and work-based learning crosswalk. And you'll see along the y-axis really this intentional work-based learning by developmental area, grade span. And then you'll see the social emotional competencies and skills that align to each of those. And this tool was developed, again, with a broad cross-section of stakeholders to include students who didn't just participate in sort of a perfunctory, we're in the room giving things a thumbs up. They were actually asked in a project-based learning scenario to provide some ordering on some of these skills, prioritization on some of the skills, but then also a social media campaign, because of course, who knows more about social media than adolescents? So they educated the adults as this resource was developing. So incredibly proud to share this artifact. It's also embedded within the case study that is full of Delaware's rich resources that can be built upon and replicated to some degree in your setting. So really delighted to offer that. The next state that we're going to feature is Kansas. So I mentioned before this notion of sort of a seed serving as the springboard. Thank you, Dr. Lawler, for a broader policy work, or very specific in Kansas's case. I just dropped the link to their case study. So they've done an incredible job of linking their individualized plan for success, their IPS, into an SEL informed structure and framework and reinforce that within something called their digital reference guide. The digital reference guide is sort of those, that trunk, if you will, that links policy and support practical, pragmatic action steps for the field within a lexicon or a taxonomy of resources. So in this case, they were so incredibly explicit about the IPS and SEL informed advising. And I got a private chat. This one's for you, Abby. So when we use SEL informed approaches in career and workforce development, in Kansas's case, in IPS and SEL informed advising, we build up a better sense of agency and individual youth and share that sense of self-directedness with them and their families in service of their communities and what they want to pursue in their lifelong goals. So this is really a beautiful example of that integration. And in a moment, you're going to hear much more eloquently Kent Reed, who is the social emotional learning policy lead in Kansas, share a bit how these things came together. And I'm dropping a link preemptively for that digital reference guide that he'll refer to in his video. His video is a little bit longer than Dr. Lawler's, so we might have to cut it a bit short, but don't worry, you'll be able to access it at a later point. So with that, I'm gonna introduce my friend Kent, and I ask in the chat if you can, as you hear it, just chat out one word that you really want to emphasize in what Kent has to say. And we'll be sharing these chats out loud at the end of his video. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Gotcha.
Okay, well, unfortunately, my colleague, Natalie Clark, who is our IPS coordinator, is out in the field in Western Kansas today. I'm the school counseling and school culture and climate specialist, and you can see the merger between what Natalie represents, which is the IPS CTE, and the three domains that I would represent from the school counseling perspective. We call our plan the individual plan of study, and the idea was to create a one-stop shop. Last year we had regional trainings on the IPS, and this year we're doing the same thing. We thought that it would be healthy for us to put together a one-stop shop, and that's what Dana asked me to share with you, is our digital reference guide for the IPS. We start out with, and if you look at the right-hand column, you'll see essentially a table of contents. Also, you'll notice on the screen that there are resources that are embedded in each one of these. Dana, you've loaded the link for the reference guide in the chat, I presume. Okay, so we start out with a discussion about the IPS. In Kansas, middle school and high schoolers are required to have an individual plan of study. And there are 4 minimum components, and we list those. But the key is really teaching employability skills. And Scott did such a great job of explaining why it's important even at the elementary level. We carry that through, of course, to middle school and high school. And so we talk about employability skills. And notice that the resource on this page is how to measure employability skills. And we have a document that helps schools do that. It's integral to Kansas counseling programs. For those who aren't counselors, 1/3 of the national standards, which would be the ASCA standards, and 1/3 of our state standards, it's a career domain. So there's a significant importance of integrating the work that Natalie is doing with the IPS and what we're doing with school counseling, okay? We developed a Kansas career development process model, and if we'll start at the right-hand side, our SEL standards are called social emotional character development standards, okay? The Kansas CAN competencies is a framework that we've contracted with the University of Kansas to develop, and very similar to what CASEL has, and very similar to what Delaware had, and Scott's talked about it, but essential competencies for success. Okay, then we add the career development cycle, and the end result, the combination, is that graphic on the left. Here's another look at it, and really what we're trying to get schools to do is help kids understand themselves, explore options, make choices, and then take action. Okay. We also utilize the 3I model, which is inquire, inform, and integrate. And you'll notice again in the lower right-hand column, we've added some resources from the American School Counselors Association. Our standards are on that page, at least a link to the standards are on that page, okay? And we developed an advising handbook, and the reason is, in order to implement the IPS, a lot of schools have had to use advisory periods, and that means that teachers are responsible for teaching something that they may not know a whole lot about. So we decided that it was important to put together a career advising handbook for that situation. And that's in the different digital reference guide. Okay, but here's the heart of it all: social emotional character development. Okay, in our standards, we have 3: character development, personal skill development, and then social skill development. And under character development, you'll see core principles. That also includes, besides problem solving, et cetera, it also includes the statutes that are relative to social emotional learning in Kansas. We call them the big 3, and that would be suicidal ideation. We're a flat act state, the bullying statute, as well as mandated reporting. Okay. So the blend of the two, employability skills in terms of social emotional learning, you see the graphics there. The middle, that graphic on the left-hand side is the Kansas CAN competency framework. And that, again, as I mentioned, has been produced by the University of Kansas. And we've circled those competencies that really fit into the idea of employability, all right? And then also you'll notice under sources, there's a link for the framework, a link to the standards again, okay? And several different links that will help you understand better the competency framework. And you can see how similar what we're doing and what Scott talked about and what Delaware is doing. All right, I think.
Thanks for that. I asked Caitlin to pause because Kent was going to go into another example of a framework, which is embedded within that link we already shared and definitely embedded within the case study itself. Shannon loves a good crosswalk, and thank you, Lori, for grabbing the phrase on interconnectedness between SEL and partners that support the development of SEL. Yeah, we agree. SEL is so essential and fundamental to success, to life success, personal development success outcomes, navigated by the individual. And really that's what this is all about, like lifelong satisfaction and fulfillment in that at a personal, individualized level. So very much appreciate that. I also want to appreciate our friend Caitlin Dermody, who is working in the background to make sure that all of this has come together for you, both visually and auditorially. You'll notice Caitlin is the lead author or an author on each of these resources that we've been sharing. So she is also a national treasure who has at least 50 more years ahead of her in service of social emotional learning policy. So if you appreciate the sound or the visuals that you're getting, feel free to drop Caitlin a compliment in the chat because I just adore her. All right, we're gonna move on to our final states. I mentioned the seed, sort of the trunk, and now let's get into the branches, which is Wisconsin. So here is the link to Wisconsin's case study. Oh, I sort of double posted there, apologize for that. Little typo on my part, but Wisconsin's case study is really chock full of all of the leaves and branches. So if we have vision from Delaware and we have a specific resource from Kansas, Wisconsin has multiple resources, and they've been in this space for a very long time, so it stands to reason. A couple things I want to just sort of elevate and point out in the case study that you'll hear is really this intentional organization and structure around collaboration, and this appreciation that SEL and enhanced by career and workforce development really does support the notion of each and every child's individualized success outcome. Wisconsin is a leading state in promoting evidence-based practices. CASEL has a program guide if you're curious about social emotional learning and evidence-based practices. I'm happy to drop that link in just a moment. But something I really think that you'll appreciate and hear in the next set of video commentary is this notion of maintenance around ongoing field learning to deepen social emotional learning knowledge and practice. So in Wisconsin, they've explicitly connected that to career workforce development, out of school time learning, definitely academic integration. So they're really finding and exploring different ways to expose developing youth in social emotionally aligned approach to a career exploration framework and a developmental progression. So I'm really excited to share Wisconsin's case study. I'm going to also share their overarching website and then their crosswalk too as a link, but no one can describe it better than our friend Terry Lesage from Wisconsin. She actually recently moved on in her policy work, but she's joined by Karen Smith and others from that state in carrying the work forward. And Lori, while that's being teed up, thank you so much for that comment on building a brick wall without mortar. Right, SEL is the mortar that holds these bricks together, and definitely thinking about building higher and stronger. It starts at the ground floor. So appreciate your comment around that. All right, without further ado, let's hear from Wisconsin's Terry Lesage.
Thank you so much. So I am joined today actually with two of my colleagues, Andrea Donegan and Karen Smith. And we were asked to talk about our work in aligning the SEL and Workforce Readiness Initiative and making that public facing. So one thing that we've been working on pretty hard over the last couple of months is a user perspective based website redesign. So that's what hopefully you're seeing on your screen right now is the hot off the press social emotional learning page in Wisconsin. And I think it's pretty interesting to show you because we nest that here in terms of system integration in our mental health framework. So scrolling down, you see our vision, SEL, something we're very excited about that we just released, which is our guiding principles, which we are now going to be using to consider how we do CTE and SEL even more because we've made these declarative stances on certain issues. Like Scott was talking about the commitment to equity, the systems-based approach, strength-based, assessing to learn. So all of that's going to be included moving forward, which is pretty exciting. And then if you scroll down to alignment and connections, we've sort of organized all of our resources by questions that we often hear from the field. And in this case, it's how do we integrate SEL into a particular framework or learning environment, that of workforce readiness. So we currently have that nested under teaching and learning, and it comes up right away. And as the other two states have shown, one of the first things that we did was a crosswalk. So in Wisconsin, we don't have SEL standards, we have SEL competencies. We made that decision very purposefully. And we crosswalked those with the existing Wisconsin employability standards and have sort of been thinking about how the SEL competencies have really illuminated what exactly those employability standards can look like in action. So they've added a degree of definition and understanding that previously they didn't have, which is interesting. Now, our employability standards are exclusively in high school. So those are the SEL competencies that we align, so 9th through 12th grade. And we've heard very loud and clear from the field that we need to go beyond that. And so we're working at going from pre-K through adult to align with our SEL competencies work. So once we had this crosswalk complete, we did some focus groups. And one thing we're very proud of is the fact that we have involved a large variety of stakeholders. So we contacted the business community, obviously, and CTE teachers, but also all sorts of day school instructors. So
We're going to pause there on Terry's commentary, but I think she was about to go into this notion of all of the engagement that has happened in Wisconsin that's detailed in the case study, which is the link that you already have. So moving on from there, because I think we have about 10 minutes and we want to make sure that we have time to draw a breath and offer any questions. Linda, are you going to talk about the additional tools and resources, or would you like me to carry on?
Either way, we just want to make sure that we share the coming attractions as well as what's already available. I just want to make sure everybody knows about them, because that's not all, folks. We've got other tools and resources to support this work, but I'll let you do it, Dana. You're doing
fabulous. Thank you for that. So moving into the next slide, I just want to share that CASEL's tools and resources that really support this work are anchored in our theory of action. So we have a state theory of action that was developed in partnership with the collaborating participating states. And we've recently updated it. So we are very, very explicit about the actionable policy steps that states can take to be able to bring about some of this innovation and change. So we're going to move forward to that next slide. That's just a little snapshot of what the TOA looks like. I've dropped the link in the chat for you. But getting into the very next slide, if you liked what you heard in some of those videos, borrowing Linda's phrase, these are coming attractions. So we will be releasing a 5-part series of webisodes, right? So in no particular order, you can view them out of sequence, but the snips that you saw are samples from those webisodes that are very specific to these topics, right? Meeting the needs of diverse learners, using SEL and workforce preparation and a developmental framework as a lever for equity, being very intentional around PCAPs, ICAPs, IPS, all of that for that SEL informed advising, and then informing high quality approaches for SEL to meet the needs of different communities, particularly underrepresented communities. It all kicks off with a webisode on that groundbreaking policy roadmap report that we referenced midway through. And I would be wrong if I didn't share with you a little more specifics and by way of CASEL's state interactive map, with which the colleagues on this presentation have really done an incredible amount of work in gathering policy exemplars and examples for you to peruse in a state-by-state basis. So looking at the next slide, this is sort of the way that you can conceive of that, right? So our policy tools are really organized through these products, if you will, these tools that states have told us they're interested in seeing developed through these focus communities of practice. And we will be releasing what's called our key features tool, which is very intentionally updated to demonstrate social emotional learning and career and workforce development integration. So if you're in a state or a setting that's really looking for a how-to guide, that will be your resource, and that will be released in hopefully 90 days or less. I'm getting a little stressed as I say that out loud. The other resource we want to spotlight is this tool that really gives a step-by-step process for updating policies and guidance in support of high quality SEL policy. So I'm looking ahead to, we've got one more slide, one more teaser for you. If you are interested in organizing a community of practice in your own right, perhaps you already have one and you're looking for other approaches to freshen that up, or maybe it's time now, it's the right condition to be organizing a community of practice. We're going to be releasing a playbook that is also a how-to guide with tools and resources from step A to Z on how to organize specifically for social emotional learning and career workforce development. So all of those great comments and intentions in the chat hopefully have been honored in this session, but definitely our hope is that they're honored in coming attractions. In like 2 minutes, we have to wrap things up. So I just want to open the floor for a moment and see if somebody wants to open their mic and pose a question to the room. Okay, that's okay. That was the quickest teacher wait time in history, because this next slide, you will see our contact information. Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you for that, Caitlin. So jot this down really quickly. And Catherine, thank you for posting a question. How are the participating states addressing measures in these crosswalk skills? Excellent question. So each state, as you know, has its own accountability system, guided in compliance to ESSA, but also centered around different requirements from Perkins. And there are some leverage points within both that states have centered on, particularly states that are focusing on equity and access. So I'm happy to talk more about that and to share some very specific examples on that. Linda, I think you should have the final word as I'm posting my last little comment in the chat.
And I would say that a couple of the case studies point to some really good examples around measures, including Wisconsin and Kansas. That both states that have done some deep thinking on this, but it's a great question, and would be happy to talk more about that offline. We're just really grateful for this opportunity to have connected with all of you today and to have gotten to share this, and would love to, be in touch if you have questions, if you have thoughts about this. We're just very interested in this work and want to see it move forward now with any and all